at 7, and it's now 6:40. So, and we have a guest, Allison Simmons from 128 Business Council.
Actually, I'm Ease Consult.
Sorry,
That's okay.
Ease Consult.
Here we go. Ease
right.
consultant.
Yep. And I'm
Thanks, everybody.
very amplified. So today's agenda, I'm Aaron Dushku, the chair, Vinnie Piccirilli, vice chair, and Tony's the secretary. He'll be coming shortly. We've got welcome members of the Watertown Public Transit Task Force, Watertown News, our town Department of Community Development and Planning, and our representative in the State House, John Heck. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So, and Matt. And we got Watertown Cable, so we're recorded today, so we're going to be up online, and a lot of people are really interested, not to say that they're not here, but people have been asking a lot of questions, so we're interested to hear an update on the progress towards the planning of this Transportation Management Association, or TMA, we're going to refer to it tonight for everybody who's watching. It's the same plan that we've had in place for a while. It's going to hopefully put some shuttle buses on the road in Watertown, and establish an organization where developers and others can adhere to transportation demand management guidelines and policy that we might put in place. And before I turn it over to the woman who's helping us to set this all up, did you want to say anything?
No, I'm going to try not to talk. If I talk, I start coughing, so.
Okay, Vinny's been sick.
I've been sick. I'm recovering, but I still have this persistent cough, so.
All right, so did you want to introduce our guest, or do you want?
No, you did a good job.
Okay, all right.
Well, I was here last in January, and we had a lengthy discussion about the way that this TMA was headed, where we were in terms of formation, a little bit of a redirect, which has been talked about in the paper and certainly at this meeting, in terms of which thing we're putting first. And the idea at the last meeting was that we're putting the TMA formation first. I was brought in October with that task, based essentially to bring together the private sector folks who are tasked with forming this TMA through their permits. And so we've been meeting pretty consistently. We started meeting in November, and now we're meeting on a monthly basis. So since the last time I met you, we've met in January and February. Last time we were here, the city councilors asked me to put together a specific budget and a timeline for where we were at in terms of what's happening with the TMA. This is a similar budget to what I showed you back in January, the difference being that we're starting to be able to fill in some of the details. So I've added the upfront cost part. We know what some of those costs for formation are now. We have legal fees looking at about $10,000. We just heard back yesterday from the town's lawyers. We're looking at the lawyer who I've put forth as the lawyer I'd like to help me with this, who's done several TMAs in the Commonwealth. Her contract was going through the town's lawyers. They were taking a look. Just heard back from them yesterday. Everything's good. We're all on the same page. So she can start work next week, essentially, in putting together the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, et cetera. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And the incorporation cost, in addition to her fees, are about $1,000. That's just registering the 501c3 with the state. Some other tax-like paperwork that we need to file with the state is about $1,000. Website development, this is still an estimate, but I've got a couple of quotes back. It's probably about an $8,000 job to get a website up that's specific to the TMA. And then sort of upfront marketing cost, I'm estimating again about $7,000 based on the quotes I've gotten. And that's for membership brochures, different collateral that we'll be able to pass out to folks, employees and tenants at these residents about the work that we do. So the other pieces are still pretty consistent with what I've showed you in the past. Programming at about $27,000. We'll start to kind of fill in those blanks too as we move forward. Some more specific numbers, salary and overhead still at about $100,000, and then ongoing marketing. So once we get the website and everything on an annual basis to continue to reprint and do promotional items, that kind of thing, at about $5,000. So the total budget we're looking at is about $158,000.
Do you mind if we interrupt with some questions?
No, please ask questions as I go.
More or less, how did you kind of plan out how long the presentation would take? So
I didn't.
Okay.
I'm guessing just me talking is probably 15 minutes. But
good, so we can
questions?
stretch it a little bit. All right. So I you weren't at the early committee meetings where we talked with Monica about where the TMA would reside, and I think the committee actually had a vote on the matter, I believe, where we said that the TMA would be kind of a subsidiary organization of the 128 Business Council. So considering your salary and overhead numbers, is it considering for that fact?
No, and I don't know where the city council is in the process with understanding of where the 128 Business Council stands with this. I was originally subcontracted with the 128 Business Council in October. My understanding, and I don't know if Gideon, you can speak to this too, is that the contract with the 128 Business Council is done. I was asked to contract directly with the town starting in February 1st. So
I heard that was being considered. I didn't know that was a done deal.
Yeah, the transition, I wasn't part of that conversation, but as far as, there was a transition because of the capacity, they're still involved to a certain degree.
they're still doing the TDM ordinance piece and I think finishing out that piece of work.
It's already
Again,
been
I don't want
moved.
I don't want to speak for the 128 Business Council or for the town, but as I said, my understanding is that I am the sole contractor now for moving forward with the TMA formation.
Good to know.
That it will not be living at the 128 Business Council for the future. And that's, I actually will talk about what my plan is for where it will live. We
All
do
right.
need to figure that piece out.
All right.
So, if I could,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's going to be a separate, standalone legal entity that's going to be incorporated.
It will be, yes.
Not going to be any way affiliated with 120 Business Council?
Correct. But that's not to say that there isn't a possibility that we might have a management company oversee the TMA, and I have a couple slides to talk about, an RFP that I think we should put out, and there's some pros and cons to that in terms of cost.
Okay.
And I can talk to you about who I'm thinking would be a good match. There's always still the possibility that this remains, either way, it will be its own nonprofit organization. We may choose to have a management company oversee that because that will help us with the salary and overhead costs and some of the initial development costs. And there's also some benefits to getting the shuttle stuff faster if we contract. But either way, we're still our own entity. It would more just be a contract to manage the TMA, but it will still be its own 501c3.
So before you move on, that we were given some good reasons as to why it should be in the 128 Business Council. One of them was cost savings. It was going to be a lot cheaper to have somebody sitting at a desk there and sharing all the resources that 128 Business Council has at their disposal. It seems to me that now we won't get that benefit. Was that decision something that they told us, or is that a decision the town made?
My understanding it was the 128 Business Councils.
They didn't want to be in that kind of business.
Correct.
All right.
But there's still the opportunity for us to see those cost savings, and that's what I was saying by I'm putting together an RFP to put out there to companies that do manage TMAs to see what we get back and how much we can drive down that cost.
So basically, you can create the same kind of partnership.
Correct.
That we were
Yep.
proposing with 128.
Yeah, I mean, I can skip to that slide. That's not a problem.
Wait, just one more thing before you go there.
Oh, okay.
So the program manager, is that person going to be potentially sitting in the office full-time of that management company, or is that somebody who's just working out of their home office or something? or
Typically,
here?
it would be somebody that would sit, I mean, if we subcontract, if we contract out that, it would be somebody that would sit at their offices.
Okay.
But let me skip, we'll skip there because that'll, so this is the long-term management of what I was saying. So there's two options. There's the professional firm, and as you were saying, it sort of allows us for less expense, less risk in terms of they'll have, insurance, all that sort of things, liability insurance, all those sort of things in place. It allows us to scale growth. So, for example, if our budget only allows us to have a full-time director 20 hours a week with a management firm, we can do that. If we're going directly and hiring somebody, it's hard to find somebody who's willing to take on that job on a part-time basis and potentially for a long-term job. Most people want a full-time position. And in the instances, the two firms I have in mind both do shuttle services, not just run their own shuttle services, but actually one of them runs the 128 Business Council's shuttle services. And they do TMA management across the Commonwealth. So in that case, they have vehicles at their disposal. So when we are ready, they'll be able to do a quick rollout. They could potentially pilot routes for us. So that's Transaction Associates. I actually already have a quote from them. The other one that I'm looking at is We Drive You, which is the company that does Athena's shuttles. They're also managing the TDM program for Athena. So
They
they're
just
going
showed
to be
up at a
putting in
meeting in Watertown recently, didn't they?
Last Tuesday, yeah, at the Arsenal Street corridor. The
Yeah.
two guys that were sitting in the back behind them.
So those are the two I'm soliciting for bids, because I think, like, for all the reasons I mentioned here, I think they're both have the experience, have the capability, and have the fleet in order for us to get the shuttle out quicker. We'll see what they come back with in terms of numbers for what they would charge for those services. The direct hire, there are some pluses there too. Obviously, it gives us a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more flexibility. So for the example of in the professional firm, they probably already have a software they're using for ride matching, and they're going to want to use that software. So things like that will be a little bit less in our control, although I don't think either one of them have a bad solution. But those are sort of the pluses of keeping it completely on our own.
If
But-
you have a professional firm doing it and it operates for 5 wonderful years and then year 6 and 7 starts to get kind of the service declines, is the board of the TMA then has the flexibility to say we're going to go with the different?
Yeah, I would say, like I said, in either instance, we're our own 501c3, we're a completely separate board and articles of incorporation. It's a contract, and we could determine the length of that contract, and it could be a renewable contract, based on the experience. So,
Catching Tony up for a second here.
Yeah.
There's been kind of another change in the thinking of this operation. 128 Business
it
Council.
wasn't me, Tony, it wasn't me.
128 Business Council has decided, I guess, through conversation with the town, that they won't be the house of the TMA, but the TMA will be either one of those professional firm or direct hire, but they won't sit inside 128 Business Council anymore.
And the rationale for that? The rationale, I remember the rationale to do it versus not doing it. So what's the rationale not to do it?
It's not a choice.
Yeah, but they don't want it.
I'm not saying whether it's a choice, I'm asking why.
128 Business Council doesn't want to be in the business of hosting a separate organization inside it, is what I guess you're saying.
I can't speak for on
Well,
their
that's what
behalf.
they wanted in the first place.
Seriously, I know.
There was a long discussion about this in terms of which way to go, and they wanted to take it, and they had some very firm reasons to take it.
Several-hour meeting.
So what Allison was basically saying is that there are options such as working with professional firms so that we have our own nonprofit, but it's a standalone, but we have the same benefits that we could have gotten through the partnership with 128. So that was the piece that you missed. So that's the rationale for doing it this way. The two options are, we can still do the direct hire was basically the other option that you as a committee have discarded as the preferred option was the 128 partnership. And so what Allison, as our consultant, has identified is there's another option which is the same as 128, but we're choosing other firms other than the 128.
Correct. So you can still have that argument and that's the most beneficial way. And I'm putting together an RFP right now to put out to those professional firms to see what we get back for long-term management of the TMA.
In a way, it actually also it eliminates the intermediary, because the 128 Business Council already hires Transaction to do their shuttle service, and we would instead
So
go
it should
straight
bring
to
down the
Transaction.
cost of any shuttles that we're looking at doing, because the 128 Business Council was obviously needed to add in costs for their administration of that, so working
So let
directly.
me see if I could catch up. I apologize.
He's the committee secretary too, so we've got to
So
make
I
sure
need
we're clear
to-
with him.
I apologize for
No
being
problem.
late. I thought we were at 7 tonight. And I was cooking dinner, so,
Did you eat?
no, I was cooking my dinner for someone else. So we were going to do this as 128 Business Council was going to be the firm that organized the shuttle, managed the shuttle, and they were going to provide us a service, the town a service, right?
Correct.
That's
Manage the
how it
TMA,
Right.
yep.
And the town wouldn't therefore hire its own staff or its own outside professional. to do that.
Correct.
But the TMA was going to be a part of them, so we wouldn't have to have our own 501c3. It would not have to have our own articles of organization or bylaws. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what their plan was on that side.
I was pretty sure it was.
So
Yeah.
that was some of the issues that we hadn't been able to figure out yet. So with the 128 model, there would have been their own board, and we would have a seat at their table.
That's right.
But they would have had the control over, ultimate control over
Right.
something. So it was their nonprofit, and we were just going to be a part of that.
So then I would say yes, then you probably weren't going to file.
That's what
Right.
we are saying. And so they decided they don't want to do that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
That's
and
my
so then that puts us back to square one. And you're suggesting there are two options. The town could not become the town could hire someone to manage the TMA. It would still then have to establish itself as a 501c3.
Yeah, either way, we're moving forward with establishing as our own 501c3. And I mentioned that before you came, that in the budget, I've now got line items up front for the upfront costs, and I know what those are. We haven't signed the contract yet, but I got the contract back yesterday from the town's legal team, who were reviewing the contract from the legal consultant that I have recommended to do the articles of incorporation for us. She's done several TMAs in the Commonwealth, so she comes highly recommended, and the town has approved her contract. So she'll be contracting directly with the town to do all the legal documentation to get this thing off the ground. It's probably, I'll show you my timeline in a second, but we're probably looking at about start to finish 10 weeks. Most of that is waiting. The articles of incorporation, once you file with the state, on their website says anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks to get back our approval. So depending on how quickly it moves through the state, could be quicker, but she's ready to go. We've just been waiting the last 3 weeks to kind of have the legal team, our legal team, look at their legal team's contract.
We'll have to go back to the group of stakeholders, or the board?
Yeah, they're good to go.
They're good to go.
The TMA members are good to go.
By the way, also, Tony, the 128 Business Council contract is now over.
You got me, Tony. I'm contracting directly with the city as of February 1st.
Yes, John?
I just wanted to ask a couple of questions.
That's good.
Who has been meeting? Is there a list of who's been meeting?
Yes, and I'll go over, I have a slide that shows you, what they're each needing to be paying, but
She said there's been
all
two
of the folks who are permitted to form the TMA, and then there's also, I think we have about 6 or 8 businesses that we've identified in addition to those who, so altogether, we're at about 15. Any given meeting, we probably have about 7 or 8. Half of those show up on any given monthly meeting, but it's a good group. They're very active and very amenable to the work we're trying to do.
Another question?
In terms of the corporate structure, and particularly the bylaws, I'm wondering about what instructions have been given to the attorney in terms of what the bylaws should say, if you give any instructions, and whether those bylaws are going to come to this committee before the corporation is incorporated and the bylaws are put in place.
I'm not sure about the bringing it to the committee. We haven't actually started work. Like I said, we've just been reviewing her contract, so assuming it gets all signed and taken care of this week, we'll probably start to sit down with her next week. What her contract includes is the nonprofit status, so filing for us a 501c3, creating the bylaws, and then creating a memorandum of understanding that each member will sign, that will allow us to then bill them for TMA membership and start to bring in funds. We have formed an advisory committee to meet with the legal team. It includes 3 members of the TMA. They were volunteer members. Right now it's Athena, Gables, and VHB are the 3 members who have volunteered to be on the committee with myself and Steve from the town
Yes,
to
Tony?
help craft those bylaws.
So Allison, we don't know the contract, we don't know about Allison's contract, is that right? I mean, this committee doesn't know about the contract with you.
What do you think we don't know about it?
What did we contract with Allison to do? Now that TMA,
We basically replaced the contract that the 128 was doing with Allison's. The 128 had the right staff in place, and then they didn't have the right staff in place. So they reached out to Allison, correct? And then
Right.
that, it became apparent that it didn't make sense to have it go through the 128 Allison process. So now it's a direct contract. And it's the exact same agreement, which is to create the TMA and get it up and running. It's a contract with the town. It's the same contract that we have with 128.
And then, therefore, you went out and made a contract with a lawyer to do this, is that right?
I have gotten a proposal from a lawyer. That proposal has gone through the legal team here at the town and the city. They've reviewed it, gone back and forth on a couple of reiterations, and we're at the point now where we're getting ready to sign the contract with the lawyer that will help us with the articles of incorporation and the bylaws. And at the last TMA member meeting, I asked for volunteers to serve on this advisory committee with me to do the bylaws. And Steve will be representing the town.
Okay.
I imagine we will run those by the city council. I don't know, I haven't gotten instructions from
It would be
the
nice
city
to
yet.
see, it would be nice to see, yeah.
Yeah, ultimately, I think the town is a member of the TMA, but ultimately the TMA is a nonprofit. But as Steve, I think, I don't want to speak out of turn here, that's my understanding, but, obviously we're not talking about this on a regular basis, but so ultimately they do have to, we as the town are part of the TMA, but the TMA has to adopt those. Of course, it'll be shared with the town.
Yeah, I think we should handle it kind of like we do other non-town council related policy or regulation matters. Like, let's just get a chance to look at it. I mean, you guys are professionals and you're putting a lot of work into it, and we know that we're only one seat at the table of a board of governance there, but I think that given that we're paying your salary and we're paying the lawyers, that we should probably get a look at it. A lot of people have put a lot of work into this already to make this happen.
Well, I also think that we wanted to be real clear about the role of the town. We want to make sure that the town, I mean, one of our...
For that reason, yeah.
I think responsibilities is to make sure that the town gets represented. And I'd like to know how much they're paying and what they're getting and so forth. So, yeah, I think we should be looking at
How much the town is paying?
well, we should be looking at the whole thing.
Yep, I have that.
Before it moves
I
forward.
have that
So we
answer
should
for you.
be-
Yep, we're,
I have
I know
that.
you guys are, you got the message that we want this to happen, and you're trying to hustle, and I think it's great, so don't get the
We're
wrong
moving it
idea.
forward.
Yeah, I think we do owe it to people to get a good look at it. And we can rally pretty quickly, too. If you, we don't want to hold up the process, but when it's ready, I think we'd all like to see it before it actually gets signed on the dotted line by everybody, and before it's too late for us to actually have any substantive comment on it. Yeah,
Tony's point was going to be my question, so.
all right. So, keep on going.
All right, I'm going to back up a little bit. So in the interim, we've created a due structure for the TMA. This is the due structure that will be in place going forward for anybody permitted or not permitted, anybody who's interested in belonging to the TMA. We went through several reiterations of this. Initially, when it was going to be housed at the 128 Business Council, we really didn't need to come up with a due structure because we were going to be utilizing their due structure. I think that's one of the things that came up as an issue was when we kind of tried to apply the 128 Business Council model to the development we had in Watertown. It was getting to be a little bit trying to put a round peg in a square hole. So this is one instance where I feel like not having the 128 Business Council as our final destination has kind of freed things up and kind of given us a little bit more freedom in a good way. What we heard from the private sector folks was that they wanted something that would be fair, so an even entry level point regardless of whether you're a developer, a residential development, an employer, and a sort of a max point. So you can see everybody is in at the same level at $2,000 as sort of the minimum amount of dues to belong to the TMA, and everybody kind of maxes out at the $12,000 mark. The residential folks felt strongly that doing it by number of units was the fairest way to do a residential development. It gets us away from dealing with, how many square feet do you have on a balcony? How many square feet is common space? These were kind of things that were kind of sticking points if we just did square footage for residential developments. So we went with units, number of units on that. Employers, number of employers is a pretty standard category for TMA dues. And then developers is based on the total square footage.
So, before you go,
Yep, and then town, we added municipality, because Newton is still very interested in potentially partnering with us. Steve has met with them once, and Steve and I just met with them last month to talk about the possibility of having Newton be involved in the TMA as well.
so the residents there are the population of Newton?
No, that would be town. That's why we have it, town is listed as a separate dues category, because it might not just be Watertown.
Under town?
Oh.
In the town section, it's labeled as residents. It's the population.
Yes, population, sorry.
Welcome. Hi. So that, you said, yeah, that's the
Yes,
population.
yes,
So
totally.
Newton would be paying 6,000, probably.
Correct, and Newton was in the same.
I have another question, and then I know you do too, Tony.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if it's, say, the Arsenal project, they're mixed use, what would, would we get a little bit of each of those categories?
I can show you what the dues are.
Wow.
So, and I know, this is tiny, and I don't know if I can make it bigger, and let me see.
Get closer to the TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to fit everything on the same spreadsheet. So in addition to the dues, so in the case of the Arsenal project, is that the one you asked about? So that's the third line item down. So their annual dues, yes, is a combination of the total square footage of everything that's not residential, and then the number of units, which puts them at an annual dues rate of $22,000. And that's every year, regardless of the fact that they're permitted or not. In order to get things moving as quickly as we wanted them to, and understanding that there was going to be a deficit in the budget, so we're looking at a $158,000 budget, we came up with the idea that we would assess those folks who are permitted to help us get to 75% of the operating budget, which is that 120, it's about 120,000. This puts us a little over. You can see the 121,664. And what we basically just did was put all the permitted folks in the pile, come up with what the rate would be for, on a either per square foot, per employee, or per unit basis, and it actually came out to $16 per either 1,000 square feet, per employee, or per unit. And that's the last column you see, so those folks at the top are all the permitted ones. On an annual basis, they will pay the annual TMA dues based on their size, and then they'll have an assessment because they're special permitted to get the TMA off the ground. So in the case of Arsenal project, $22,000 in annual dues, and then another almost $16,000 for their assessment.
That gets us to the 100.
That gets us to 75% of it. I felt strongly like we shouldn't try and get everything off the backs of those who are permitted. There was a sense that there are a lot of businesses in this town that just came in right before the permit process that will come in after this. So I felt like 75% was a good number for us. I think 120,000 is really close to where we need to be. And given the additional members, which are at the bottom, which of those that you see up there, I've already gotten commitments for 25,000.
Town of Watertown is included, I see, right?
Yep, the town of Watertown's up there, VHB. So these are all additional members who have been attending the meeting, so I have no reason to think that they're not all going to join. But I literally have verbal commitment, once the MOUs are in place, for 25 of that $43,000. And this doesn't include folks who I think should be at the meetings, who I'm still working on inviting, like Perkins and Nobles. The town of Newton is not included in this list. So I feel like 75% is a fair way to kind of treat those folks who are permitted to form the TMA without putting 100% of the burden on them. It's sort of a good faith effort on our part to say, we understand you chose to build at a time we're choosing to build a TMA, and you need to contribute for that, but we're not going to saddle you with the whole thing, because there are other developers and businesses in town that will benefit from the work that we're doing.
Okay, I know we have questions on this one.
Absolutely.
I'll just fire away with mine first. So that 58 we're talking about is without a shuttle.
Correct.
So and everybody's aware of that, and everybody's aware that
Correct.
then, for however tough a pill to swallow this may be, there's a bigger one coming, because as soon as everybody's on board and working together, like generating their revenue, like Hanover, like Elon, for example, isn't even built yet, they're not
Right.
making money, they know that there's going to be, another assessment that comes down to that?
Correct. So the way I envision that the shuttle will work is whatever route we have in place, whoever's served by that route will divide the cost.
Oh, that was
So
my
for
next
example, if
question.
we do a Pleasant Street corridor route,
Yeah.
the folks along the Pleasant Street corridor who are involved with the TMA and anyone who wants to be a part of that shuttle along that route will need to pay into the service, and it will be divided evenly across the folks who are served by the route.
All right, so, and they know that, so even if there's 3 people on there who say we're in for the shuttle, and if it's another $100,000, they each got to come up with $33,000.
Depends on their permit. Some of the permits have maximums
I was going to
written
ask
into
that.
them.
Yeah.
Yep. Some of them are pretty open-ended and say you will help, a portion of the share. Some of them say a financial contribution, so it will depend on who.
But it has to be reasonable or we'll lose it.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason too why I was doing the 75%.
Reasonable is
because we're not
justified
done.
by what it really costs.
Right. And that was part of my reasoning behind the 75% and not saddling with these folks with 100% of the TMA costs, because we're not done asking for financial contributions from them. And at the end of the day, they need to see a return on investment on
Right.
this, or they're not going to
The developer doesn't
continue.
need to see a return on the investment. Developers are obligated to make a contribution. They don't need to see a return on their investment. I mean, go ahead.
What I was going to say was that Grove Street, we know that they're not even on one of the planned routes so far. So they're jumping onto this as a member here. Looks like WS Crescent, right?
They're a suggested member, but
They come to the meetings, yeah.
they can,
Well, they also have a development that is permitted, so they have 202 Arsenal,
so 202 is WS Crescent. It's
same developer.
the same, it's half, it's almost the same.
Oh, okay. All right, does anyone else have any questions about this slide? John?
In terms of the planning going forward, planning of the entity going forward, in terms of budgeting, has there any potential to pay or any thoughts or plans as far as like, 5-year commitments so that contracts can be led or whatever?
In terms of the assessment?
Yeah, in terms of
We do need to figure that out. I'm imagining that that'll come up in the discussions when we are trying to do the MOUs. There's some discussion, I think there's some folks that do think there should be a deadline, that we will do this for X number of years, and if the TMA doesn't get off the ground, then we're off the hook. Some of them already have a financial contribution maximum written into their permits. After that, we have no teeth to make them do it. It would be nice if we could get everybody to agree that we will do our best in good faith effort to make this organization financially stable on its own, but that if for some reason a major player pulls out and we are at a point where we can't meet our budget, that we do have the ability to go back to these permitted folks to help us close the gap.
Is the idea of a multi-year assessment, is that something that's a benefit for like all TMA services, or is that particularly in terms of shuttle costs?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Well, it's my understanding, it's very amateur understanding, that it's very much a benefit to at least TMAs with shuttle. Shuttles to have multi-year
Correct.
commitment.
Yes.
Or to multi-year contract.
Correct.
I'm just wondering if that's more of a concern with the shuttle and not so much with the other TMA services, or if it's really a concern for
I definitely think it's a more concern with a shuttle, because especially if you're putting capital investment, if you're asking somebody to invest in buses on behalf of your contract, then they're going to want to see a 5 to 7 year contract in order to recoup their capital costs that they're putting in for the shuttle. So I would say definitely in the case of the shuttle. In the case of the TMA, this is the first TMA I've worked with that has this separate assessment from the dues. So there are other towns I work with that have site plan special permit requirements but it's to belong to the TMA. So it's that annual dues. You will, in perpetuity, belong to the TMA, which I think is definitely in play here. It's that additional assessment. It's that additional amount that you will pay to continue to fund the TMA, whether or not we're sustainable, is the part that's unique, at least in my experience, to Watertown. And so there's a sense within the business community that we're willing to do that, but how long do we have to do that? And is there a point, at some point, if we are never able to get this thing financially independent, at which we say it didn't, our experiment didn't work, and you are no longer.
I mean, I would say that part of the intent of the assessment, you're calling it an assessment, was the start.
Correct.
It was intended when we wrote the conditions that whatever it was going to be, at first it wasn't a TMA, and then we started calling it a TMA, that it would be, that they were agreeing to be a partner in getting it up and running. And so that's a proportionate share of getting it up and running.
Right.
And that's the assessment. So that's what you came up with, the assessment. And the fair cost, it's like, just this month, there's another member that has to be a member.
Right. Yeah, the town is continuing to add people who have special permits to it. And in fact, tonight, at 4:30, I had to add somebody to the list. So, no, it's good.
Is that the World Realty? Yeah.
But,
Yes,
but
that's
they
World
can't-
Realty,
but
yes,
their
we just
form
added
started
them.
until they pull a building permit. So that was, part of their, that's when it triggers for them is
And are they the only ones with the ceiling, or do others have ceilings too?
ceilings.
Yeah.
I feel like there's one other.
Yeah, Links has a ceiling.
World Realty's 30,000, I think, right?
32,
35.
about
Oh.
35, something like that.
All right.
And I want to say
Per year.
Lynx is like 55 or something like that.
Wonderful.
All that being said, I feel like we're in really good shape. I'm not concerned about the health and well-being of the TMA, given the players that we have in play and the level of commitment I've seen so far. But yes, that's something that we will need to figure out. And given what Gideon just said, then I would say if the intent was to get it started, that we do put a time frame on the assessment. So we can come up with what that is, but, for the first 3 years, if we don't meet our budget, 5 years, whatever it is, however much time we want to
It might mean
get.
that the people that are part of the assessment, that we may have to scale back the full-time level of, maybe the manager of the team A is not full. If we
Right.
can't get it to be sustainable by getting more members or for other reasons.
And we scale back on the budget.
Then that's.
Although it's a pretty lean budget, I have to say.
It's a very-
I'm not sure how many nonprofits can run on much less than 150,000.
And I think we've discussed, there's quite a few other large employers in town.
Correct.
all
That
have
are not
parks
even on this list, yeah.
That aren't on this list. Yeah, the idea was let's focus on these, and then VHB, for instance, was not on our list. They actually reached out to us. They were very, this is what they do for a living, and they're very interested in TMAs. So they reached out to the town, reached out to Allison,
Yeah.
and they're very excited about it.
Yep.
They're committed to this.
Aren't they,
And,
they're seeking
Tufts Health Plan at
special permit.
$12,000.
It's a very minor amendment,
It's an amendment to their,
very minor amendment. So that the mezzanine is attached on each side, it's like 2,000 square feet.
Are the people on that list already, for the notes, are these the people in the TMA?
the top ones.
Even
I can't
everyone
read it.
on this list has attended a member meeting. The folks on the top half of the list are the ones who are permitted to form the TMA. The additional members are folks who do not have a requirement to do it, but have been participating in the formation of the TMA. And as I said, of the $43,000 in dues right there, I've had verbal commitment for $25,000 of it. And include, the town of Watertown is on that list as well. So the town of Watertown, VHB, Bell Watertown, and Tufts Health Plan have all verbally committed to me that they are interested in signing an MOU to the, and, Tufts is at $12,000 annually in dues, so that, that's not chump change.
And the Newton, when you consider
Newton's not on this
Newton-
list. Perkins School for the Blind is somebody I've identified. Nobles. I mean, there's several large players who are not. I haven't had a chance to meet with them and haven't had a chance to invite them to the meeting.
I ask about
as yet.
Newton because I know that Newton was interested in, I think, in a neighborhood in particular, and I think that neighborhood is dominated mostly by that Chapel Bridge development area, so, maybe Newton would be, maybe the people who live there or work there would be served at a lower rate if it was the municipality versus if it was the Chapel Bridge development. Did you consider that?
Well, Newton itself has shown strong interest
Yeah.
in, they've been talking to Steve
Okay.
about being a member, and it's not just because of that one
Okay.
area. That's part of our mill.
Charles River Mill District, yeah.
So that's an area of Newton and Waltham. And we've also talked about how just because there's a named Watertown teammate doesn't mean that we're only serving citizens of Watertown. There's also a pretty large employment base right across on River Street, right across from Pleasant Street. So, there's another 1,000 employees sitting right there. A lot of different firms that
Right.
we had initial conversations with. My wife happens to work at one of them. And so, before Allison was here, we had conversations with them. They wanted to know the numbers. And so there might be some groups.
Yeah.
just over
There's
the
definitely
line,
more outreach
Waltham
that can-
and Newton have
Don't-
businesses too.
Yeah, don't forget about those commuter rail hubs like McLean Hospital right there by the Waverly and New Balance and everything that's going on over there.
Yeah.
I mean, you have your own TMA over there. I'm sure you understand.
I'm not involved with the Alston right now, but yes.
Yeah.
So sorry if this is.
No, I'm-
Belaboring the obvious or if this, but anyway, it's understood to ask that. So my question is about, what is sustainability that we're saying that the permittees, that the thinking is that the permittees would be subject to a special assessment for a certain number of years until launch velocity is reached with sustainability. So is sustainability that there are enough members with a regular assessment to pay the budget?
Correct.
Budget,
Yes.
for whatever the services are, and so whether that's with a shuttle or without a shuttle. And so that will depend on the number of businesses, et cetera, that actually join, and I guess that gets back to the sort of the commitment issue of how long they're going to be.
Right. And I think in terms of the permitting, I think all of the permitted folks are required in perpetuity to belong to the TMA. So we're guaranteed that $68,000 base of dues, and then it's just a matter of making sure that we do a return on investment for the folks who are not required to do it, that they see a value in still belonging to the TMA based on its services. And a lot of the, the budget, a lot of these upfront costs go away, right? So we only have to pay a lawyer to incorporate once. That's not going to be an annual cost. Website development, obviously there'll be some maintenance costs, but there's some one-time hits that we're taking to get it off the ground that won't be a part of the ongoing budget. So potentially, and as we said, if we go with a firm, we can sort of ramp up and play with some of our numbers for what we have to meet the budget going forward.
So it's sort of built into these numbers, and maybe it's just recognizing the fact of life unknown, that the organization isn't expected to be able to sustain itself with permittees only. That just the permittees can be charged enough dues under the schedule to meet the budget.
Yes, and that's why I'm constantly harping on the return on investment piece, because in order for this organization to be longstanding and be something that the community and your businesses are interested in doing, there needs to be that return on investment. Because eventually, hopefully 20 years from now, there still will be a Watertown TMA, and it will be a thriving nonprofit that does great work. And the idea that at some point people were permitted to do this will be an afterthought. That, to me, is the ideal that we're looking for, that, every new business that comes into Watertown, regardless of whether they're permitted, wants to be part of the Watertown TMA because it's doing good work, it's helping,
I think we all
offer
want that.
sustainable options.
We all
Right.
want that. I share a little bit of Tony's anxiety around that, your comment about we're guaranteed that $68,000 a year no matter what because they're permittees. I think the way that it's being set up, I mostly have faith that it's going to work. I think you have there's an interest in these developments to make this work. It's going to help everybody out. But I just, Tony's concern is one that a lot of us share here in leadership in this town, where we've kind of opened the doors a little bit to big development against some of our kind of better judgment sometimes, but we're forging ahead with this economic development plan that our forefathers put in place. And we know that it means great revenue, but we were really, hoping that this TMA commitment that these guys made would be enough to get them in, to get this shuttle service running. So if we only fall back on a commitment now from get the shuttle service running to $68,000, or each piece of what that $68,000 represents from those tables you showed, then if everything else crumbles away, we're not going to be able to get out of each one of those members in that top list anything more than what that thing says.
More than the 68,000. Well,
Yeah.
as I said, I think the shuttle piece is a different, that would be a separate contract from this, essentially, right? So they're on the hook for two things. They're on the hook for forming the TMA, and they're on the hook for the shuttle.
Okay.
What I'm talking about now is the TMA. When we get to the point and we have numbers we can put to the shuttle, and we figure out where the route is, then that would be a separate contract with each of these developers around shuttle operations.
And the condition required that as well.
All right.
And that discussion would
So the
be a
shuttle
separate
operation-
discussion of how long do we operate it at a loss, for how many years?
So
for-
that's back to Gideon's comment about it has to be within reason, and within reason, we can justify by saying that's how much a shuttle service costs. If it's more than, if your total ends up being more than what your tables show, it's like a special assessment for shuttles that you have to pay.
Right.
You get that?
No.
What did you want to say?
I want to be just for the notes anyway, is
Yeah.
that the $68,000 from the permitted companies is something that goes on forever, and it's only dedicated to the TMA. And then the other money that came up with the $125,000, that was from non-permitted
Well,
companies.
so there's 68,000 in annual dues from the permitted folks.
Yeah, and the rest.
Then there's a 53,000 or 54,000, let's just round it off, in special assessments to get the TMA off the ground from those permitted folks.
Above and beyond what those
Above and beyond their
formula.
annual dues, they will have a special assessment because we have a gap in the budget right now because we're a brand-new organization and we have startup costs and we're continuing to grow membership.
And the rest of the money
That
comes from-
$54,000, though, we're not sure how long we're going to, whether the assessment will be a one-time thing or over a period of time.
So I'm the developer who was permitted, and I was told I had to spend X amount of money.
But you weren't told X amount of money, that's the problem. You were just told you had to do, there was no
Some
dollar
of them were
amount.
told that,
No,
Only two out of,
no,
Well-
some of them negotiated a cap because they wanted to be able to get their financing. They couldn't have an unfunded
mandate.
requirement in their
Right.
conditions that could be $1 million. So some of them are nervous and they requested a cap.
Okay, point taken, so go on.
so,
So all it says is proportionate share.
say what?
All the conditions say is contribute in a proportionate share.
I thought there was at least two who said they had a dollar figure.
That's what she just said.
Yeah, there's two that have a cap. So there's two that are, one is 32, we think around, and the other one's like around 55. So we can't go beyond that amount.
Okay, I got it. I think I got the notes.
And you understand that when the shuttle comes around, that's a whole different assessment.
Oh, I thought that the shuttle would be instituted by the TMA.
Yeah, but it's a different, the value, the cost of that will be split up.
And so if there is no shuttle, for whatever reason, it doesn't make it, right? The TMA doesn't make it, the shuttle doesn't make it, the developers are off the hook for their contribution to the shuttle.
The condition reads that the developers are on the hook, have to pay a proportionate share to start the TMA, doesn't talk about actually running the TMA, and to contribute to a TMA that has a shuttle. That's not how the condition is pretty consistent throughout all the approvals, that it's proportionate share to get the TMA off the ground, and the TMA wouldn't have a shuttle. So the expectation was not just the TMA, because a lot of TMAs don't have shuttles, but this expectation was because it was a traffic mitigation measure, that there would be a shuttle. Service, not shuttle.
So when earlier you said that the shuttle would be divided evenly across those who used it. The cost of the shuttle would be divided evenly across those who used it. So
Right.
are you saying that a developer who was told that they had to pay for the initiation of the TMA and a portion of for the shuttle, would not pay their portion, or if they didn't, whether they used it or not used it? What does
I
it
meant
mean
by
to say
use-
that they divided evenly across?
What I meant by use is that it would have to serve their population. So in other words, we're not going to ask Athena to pay for a Pleasant Street corridor shuttle. If it's not even going by their building or picking up their people, they're not going to pay into that shuttle service. They would pay into the shuttle service that serves their corridor that they're impacting. So the impact they have is directly proportional to, whether we put a shuttle in that area, and that's what they would be responsible to pay for. So if we decide an Arsenal Street corridor is what we want, shuttle is what we want, then the folks along Arsenal Street who are permitted to do it would have to pay for it.
Yeah, I don't think that's the way that it was written. We worked very hard. I don't understand what you're saying on this, Gideon. They're going to commit to the shuttle, whether they use the shuttle or not.
That's what,
No, that's not what
we're
she's...
talking about different things. The people that are on the top list have committed to being a part of the TMA and the shuttle. If we find that someone that committed to the shuttle doesn't work, then we can't get the shuttle to their spot, and that's something we have to decide, and the TMA has to decide, then maybe they want it and they're not going to get it. That's a different story, right? That's like, if it doesn't, financially, it doesn't make sense to get to 65 Grove. They want the shuttle, but it's just like, no, that's going to kill the shuttle. And that's a different story, but the expectation, so there's some analysis that has to go into this, but...
They're all on
the expectation
Pleasant and
is that
Arsenal.
They're all on, the ones that are committed are on Arsenal Street corridor. We put that in there because they're on the Arsenal Street corridor and the shuttle's going to be serving them. We discussed another option where there would be a shuttle that ran the Pleasant Street and that Watertown Square might be used, and that it might also serve the Arsenal Street corridor, so that it would be double the service on Arsenal. And then the Arsenal Street group would also be contributing to a portion of the Pleasant Street, because the priorities in the town were those two corridors.
So what
that's
you
something
said
that
at the end is important. You said that the folks on Pleasant Street, on Arsenal Street, will be contributing to a portion of the shuttle on Pleasant Street.
Depending on, that's not where we're at right now, because Allison's working on the formation of the TMA, but we do the analysis for where the shuttle will be successful, and Patrick was saying the exact same thing, but we really want the Pleasant Street shuttle to be a successful part of the program. And in order to do that, we have to figure out if we can have it, Watertown Square, I think, is a major hub, and it might be that the shuttle can, the shuttle can go to Watertown Square and then continue on Arsenal Street and go to where its destination is, which we don't know the demand. There's no businesses, Athena's the one that's running. So Allison's been doing surveys as well to figure out that stuff. All this stuff we talk about shuttles is conjecture until we do the analysis. I think that's
Okay.
my opinion. She's
So we're really not talking about shuttles tonight.
I have a couple slides because I knew you would want to talk about it.
Let's keep going into the slides. If we want to come back later, we can. Is it-
So I think we covered this. This is the next step with the lawyer. We did decide to go with, after much debate, what to call the TMA. We just decided for now, we're calling it the Watertown TMA because that's what we've been calling it for 2 years. And there was really nothing else that anybody felt strongly about it being called. So if we decide down the line we come up with a better, name,
That's its official name.
that's its official name. When we start to brand it and talk about it to the world, we might choose to call it something else. But for now, it's going to be known as the Watertown TMA and the Articles of Incorporation. This is the part I talked about putting out the RFP for the long-term management of the TMA. I put together a timeline just to give you guys a sense of where I think this is headed. So I will meet again with the TMA member group on the 16th. We'll talk about the fact that we're beginning the legal work. Again, as I mentioned, we have the advisory committee in place. We'll probably set up a schedule for when the advisory group will meet with the lawyer to start having additional meetings with just that group around the Articles of Incorporation. I put it together an RFP to send out to the two firms I mentioned and then out to anybody else who might be interested in applying for it for the long-term management of the TMA. I'm going to have the due date on that be April 1st, and that will give me some time to review it myself and with Steve and his staff, and then bring that to the group on the 27th of April for the group to review the RFPs and come up with a recommendation for how we want to move forward with the long-term management of the TMA by the end of April.
You're calling, that group is essentially the board?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And then we'll meet again. These dates are tentative. I still need to doodle poll and make sure they work for everybody, but we typically be meeting the third or fourth week of the month. So the meeting on the 18th, we will finalize those management plans, hopefully have a contract in place with whoever the chosen firm is, if we decide to do it that way, and or if we decide to go off on our own, we'll probably start to put together a job description for an executive director and look at the potential of starting the hiring process if we decide to go in that direction. And by then, hopefully the lawyer has done all her magic, and by June 1st, we will have MOUs for folks to sign and officially launch the TMA sometime in July, once we have checks and MOUs in place. And personally, I think we should do a big kickoff event.
Add it to the assessment. A big party.
The party bus.
When do you think that, let's see, so given what we were saying about the bylaws and how we'd like to take a look at that, when would we have another status report and review of that here?
I'm guessing that's probably around end of May, early June as well, when the MOUs, I mean, we'll have to have the bylaws in place simultaneously with the MOUs, so I would say by June 1st, we should have pretty tight bylaws that we can
Can
run
you
by.
go back to the money, your initial budget again?
Again, this is a proposed budget because depending on what we choose to do with the
So the
long-term.
$100,000 for the salary and overhead, is that if you went with the higher person as opposed to the management team?
We're not sure because I don't have the RFPs back from the management firm. I would say, give or take 20,000 maybe. We might be able to save by doing, that's just a guess, but, I mean, the thing with the management firm is we can give them a budget. We can say, here's what we can afford, and they can assign staff people according to the level and the number of hours that we have available to us. If we hire somebody, we have to offer a salary, and we have to do that on an annual basis.
When you say "we" have to offer them, it's not the town that's hiring this person. It
It's
would
the
be
TMA. It'll be its own
TMA.
501c3. The town is a member of that, but it's its own
And
entity.
the director of the TMA at this point is?
It will either be the management firm will have somebody that is staffing it, or we would hire. That's what the salary and overhead would cover. It would cover the cost of the executive director.
And who makes that decision?
We're going to look at the RFPs, so basically the TMA members, the board of the TMA.
So what role do we have in this?
You're a member on the board. Oh, well, not the city council. The town
The
has a
administration.
seat.
I think our role here in this committee is just, like it has been all along, it's advisory. We're giving policy direction, and we may look at the bylaws, say, yeah, that looks good, but, it's not our role to approve or not approve or rewrite the bylaws, because that's the board of directors'
And you'll
responsibility.
have, the town has a vote because you have a seat, but you have an equal vote with everyone else.
But I think our job is just the sanity check for the public. Are we heading in the right direction? We're providing sort of a much higher level policy direction to make sure that what the town ends up with is what the town the public is expecting we're going to get. And much like our discussion a couple of months ago when we sort of reiterated that it is our expectation that a shuttle service will be part of the TMA. And I don't know if that was the breaking point which caused 128 Business Council to pull out or not. But, that, I think we were very clear, sort of providing that policy direction. And, that's, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with a shuttle. I mean, that's because that's what we promised to the public. So, now, that being said, we got to make it work, and it needs to be successful, and, we can't just force it on businesses and residences. It needs to be a value-add proposition. We want to make them use this service because it's going to be good business for them. So our job, your job, the executive director's job, is to put together a program that is going to make it attractive. And that's sort of the business sense that, any developer's going to say, I want to be a part of this because it's going to add value to me. But we can't do it that, we're going to force you to do it even though you don't want it because, we're going to put the legal screws to you. That's really not a good way to run a business, a good way to run a consumer-based service. And at the end of the day, this is a consumer service, and people who will be using it will have other choices. They could take their car. So
They could take the MBTA bus, they could take...
but again, our real focus is not to get people to shift from using the MBTA bus to using the Watertown shuttle.
Right.
Yeah, it's really, we want to get people to come out of their single occupancy vehicle car and use this shuttle bus, because that's the only way we're going to end up reducing peak hour traffic congestion. So we need to make it attractive to the people who are living in these apartment complexes or working in these large office buildings to say, I'm not going to take my car to work. I'm going to use the shuttle because I can bill an hour of work, I can read a book, I can listen, I can do all kinds of other stuff that I can't do if I'm driving a car. And that's the value add to the consumer who would make them use the shuttle. So our job is to make it attractive to those people who may be driving to work to use this instead. And the more exciting we can make it, the more convenient we can make it, the more amenities, free Wi-Fi and stuff that, we can add to it, the more people are going to want to use it.
Yeah, but that's not our job.
No, that's not our job. That's the executive director of the Watertown TMA
Absolutely.
Corporation, is to put together a marketing package to make it attractive to people who are currently
Absolutely.
driving single occupancy vehicle cars to work.
Thank you.
That's in a
Yep.
nutshell.
And that'll
One
be
of
the
the-
branding of all of the TMA services, as well as the shuttle, all of the things we've talked about, the guaranteed ride home and the, bike ped stuff and,
Tony?
One of the issues we had way back when was that the town should have more influence on the TMA than be equal to other people. And we also talked about the role of having a public person on it, someone who is not a member of but someone who's a member of the public. And I don't see any of that, and you're just saying everybody should be equal based on how much money they get?
that's the first I've heard, that the town was looking to have a larger stake than the other members, or that they were interested in having a community participant.
May I ask, have you changed anything as far as I think everybody in the room, besides you, had the understanding that this is a service that the public can ride? Last time we talked about it was for free also. That hasn't changed, has it?
The for free part that wasn't necessarily, we haven't figured that piece out.
Yeah, I haven't had any real discussions with the TMA members around shuttle services at all.
All right.
Other than to say, we needed to put one of these two things first, and in my mind, it made more sense to get the organization set up that could be a conduit to cash checks when we got to the point where...
And I know you have a slide on that, but I just
Yeah,
want you to
and we-
remember that,
yes.
because we had at least 2, maybe 3, 2.5-hour meetings with 128 Business Council before you came around, and that was the topic of one of those long meetings, was whether we charge or not, and we decided at one point we weren't going to charge because the fare collection thing was so confusing, and we wanted this to be a jump-off sometimes to transfers, and transferring was confusing.
Subsequently, we were wondering, we were thinking of, we don't want it to be a substitute for the MBTA. And so if you're running the Arsenal Street corridor and it's free,
People are going to get off.
people are going to use it rather than the MBTA. It's free. So we have to weigh that, some of that structure stuff, and that's what the team will do once we get to that.
All right, well, fare collection is no easy task, so, look, if you, I act personally, and I know you want to talk, hold on a second. Personally, I think it's fine to charge. It's going to cost us something to set that up, but I want to make sure that the public can use it. That's something that I felt strongly about. I know that we're mitigating the impacts of the developments, as Vinny has said many times, but I think the public has also been kind of waiting on this opportunity.
That's always been the understanding. Whether or not it was free, we haven't talked about, but
That's
the
fine with me.
understanding has always been if wherever this bus serves, that the community would be able to.
Tony?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I just think, to Tony's concern is that, we had talked about, when we set it up, the discussion is, can the public use it, for free, for $1, whatever it is, let's not get into that at this point. I think it's too early in the discussion. But there will be a separate assessment for the shuttle service. And when we get to once the TMA is up and running and we're in the planning for the shuttle service, then the town needs to decide how much they want to contribute. And certainly, our MBTA assessment is, $2.5 million a year that we're paying, town of Watertown is paying for the benefit of having MBTA buses in Watertown. We can decide, when we set up the shuttle, that if we want to make non-member, public non-member ridership a priority on the shuttle, and the town can pay for it, and whether that's, if everybody else is paying $30,000, and the town's paying $60,000, or the town's paying $100,000 a year, that's a decision that we're going to make as a community, and we will eventually be a budget issue for the town council to appropriate money to do that. And I think we all expect that the town is going to be a member of the shuttle service, and we all hope that the public at large can use the shuttle service. What it's going to look like, how much it's going to cost, it's way too early to say. But I guarantee you that the town will be contributing money. Our tax dollars will be contributing some way to this to help be a partner in allowing the public to ride it. But I don't know what it's going to look like or how much it's going to cost, and I don't think anybody does. So we have the executive director, who's going to be hired, is going to have a lot of work to do to put together that business plan, that's whatever it is that makes sense. And I personally am very excited about getting to that point, but we need to get through the first step.
Right.
Just on that discussion of the shuttle, then, you could be a member of the TMA and not be a member of the shuttle.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah. That's.
Other than
yes.
for the permitted folks.
Correct.
The permitted folks have to be a member of
Folks
the
who have
shuttle.
permit requirements to belong to the shuttle will have to do the shuttle, but the other additional members, it will be an option for them. And they would pay a proportional cost if they choose to take advantage of it, but they don't have to. We can't force them to. We have no
I'm
mechanism.
saying, yeah, the non-permitted people can decide to be part of it if they
Correct.
want, and they would pay a
Exactly.
proportional amount.
Exactly.
And I don't, I don't know where we get to the discussion of the
Which is something I just thought of. Sorry, I don't want
management
to,
of-
yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that whole equation will come into play, like, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, that Pleasant Street Quarter, most of the developers along there are residential developments. If we're offering it free to residents, why would a Bell Watertown pay into the shuttle?
Well,
You've now made it free for all of their residents. There's no reason for a developer that's not permitted to do it if we're offering it free to residents. So that may be a reason why we would want to charge.
Getting a stop helps.
I'm just thinking off the top of my
Well,
head.
let me
I have an idea of maybe if you're a pure resident, you want to use the TMA. I mean, there's you pay a fee by just getting on, you might be able to come to the town and buy
A pass. Yeah.
that's for the year. So you're basically contributing.
Okay.
That's just maybe.
Hold it.
I would
There's
just
different ways to
hope-
do that. so-
Yep.
Hold it, let Tony finish.
I just would hope that when you discuss the shuttle with people, that they're in addition to the issues, how much and whether the public pays, that there's some public representation outside the town, that we find a way to have public representation on the shuttle board or however, because I assume there'd be a management, if this is a separate contract, who manages the shuttle? the TMA director?
Would
Because
manage
is it
the
a product of-
contract. I don't envision
think
that the TMA will operate its own shuttles. I mean, I don't think we're going to buy vehicles and,
But they would manage the
hire
contract,
people to
yeah.
drive those
Well, who would
buses.
manage the contract?
Whoever we choose to give the contract to. So you put out an RFP to do shuttle operations.
But-
So it might be Boston Coach, it might be,
But is it a separate entity than the TMA?
no, it would be a service offered by the TMA. We would contract with a
Okay.
provider.
And so at that point, I'm suggesting that there be some role for the community to have some representation, since they're going to be using it, to have some input into what it looks like on a regular, ongoing basis.
Like a public advisory
Person.
member of the TMA or the first shuttle.
Well, since the shuttle is a product of the, we're not, you've already moved beyond that. I wanted some representation on the TMA for the public, but we have a structure that doesn't include that. So now I'm asking for it to be some representation on the shuttle up for the public.
So basically, kind of some kind of a committee member that can provide some designated resident or
Right. Right.
Depending on how it looks, I don't think that's out of the ordinary. The MBTA has such a thing. They have this MBTA Rider Oversight Committee, so maybe it could be its own little group or something that offers insight, feedback.
And then one other question, given the timeline sounds very aggressive and wonderful. When that is up and running, the shuttle is up, I mean, the
TMA.
TMA is up and running, and they start to roll out the services that a member can take advantage of. And, I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of questions for whoever manages that, whether it be the director we hire, or, I mean, not we hire, the TMA board hires, or the TMA board goes the other route. Who takes advantage of which services is really up to the members. Is that
Correct. I mean, the TMA services will be offered to all of
All
our...
members, and
All
then-
members, right, and then it's a matter of, promoting it within the sites and within the
So if you want to
residents.
give that, how long do you give that before you start talking about a shuttle?
I mean, we're talking about shuttles the whole time. There's certainly a planning process
Yes.
that will need to happen.
Right.
A lot of it is around when people are occupying these developments, I think. So,
Are you talking about the other services?
No, I understand.
Talking about the
that.
shuttle,
I was
right?
wondering, I was assuming I was going to hear an answer that said we need to have the other services run for a year. We need to make sure that the TMA is up and operating for a year before we talk about a shuttle. I mean, talk about instituting a shuttle, not talking about a shuttle, but talking about a shuttle actually going online.
yeah, I don't feel comfortable giving you a time that I think a shuttle will be on the ground. Not for lack of having the discussion, as I said, I think the big obstacle, I think, at this point is people to ride the shuttles from within this base of people that are paying for it. Some of the bigger developments are not, are just barely shovels in the ground right now. So we don't even know where these proposed people are going to need to go to.
And our biggest development has a very substantial shuttle system, right? I mean, the one...
Well, I'm actually going to talk about that in my slide.
You mean Athena?
Yeah, why don't you take that slide?
So, I knew you guys would want to talk shuttles, and that has not been the focus of what I do. It's not what my contract is to do, so I just want to put that out there, that I've been contracted to form the TMA, but I know shuttles is a key part of what this TMA needs to do long-term, so it's certainly always on the purview of what the TMA membership is working towards. My personal and professional recommendation for where we should start working on the shuttle piece is to get the folks who are already running shuttles on Arsenal to come together in a shared service scenario. These three, Athena's already running, I think they're up to 6 shuttles at this point. Lynx, while they do not have a tenant yet, this is directly from their brochure that they're advertising to tenants, and that little green vehicle in the middle is the Lynx shuttle. So they're basically proposing to anybody who rents there that there will be a shuttle to Harvard Square. They're planning to do their own private shuttle, and the Residence Inn already has a shuttle to Harvard Square. So there's already 3 private shuttles from people who are permitted to do shuttles through the TMA out there. So there's a business, they clearly see the business need for this. I think what we need to do is start to, rather than ask for funds, which we will do, but start to pressure them to say, we're not going to run, every business along Arsenal is not going to run their own private shuttle. That's not what we signed up for. What we signed up for was for a shared service shuttle within the corridor. So that's just, again, my personal recommendation would be to have Steve and his staff and you guys have that be the message coming out on the Arsenal Street corridor for the short term.
Can you go back to the timeline? So, there's no way to put that discussion earlier on?
Oh, no, I'm proposing that happen early. That's why I'm saying, this is the discussion I'm suggesting we have now, in terms of what we can do for shuttle work now. This is the discussion I think that needs to happen now.
Yes. Good.
It's on our list of items to be talked about.
Right. Rather than trying to do a corridor study and figuring out what this proposed shuttle that the TMA will run will do, my recommendation would be to get these three folks who are already going to be running shuttles in this to come together in a shared service shuttle that will be a TMA shuttle.
And what value would they, why would they do that?
They're permitted to.
Or why would they come together?
Because that's what they have.
It's either that or they're going to have to pay to run a parallel service, which makes no sense. Who's going to ride that? Right? So if Athena's going to continue to operate their own shuttle, and Lynx is going to continue to operate their own shuttle, and the Residence Inn operates their own shuttle, and then we come along and say, well, we've decided we need a shuttle on Arsenal, and you have to pay into it, we're going to have a forced shuttle, but guess which shuttle these guys are going to ride? Their own private individual shuttles, right? Because they don't have to stop at the Lynx, and they don't have to stop at the Residence Inn. It's door-to-door service. So essentially, we've wiped out, other than the residents, our ridership on this corridor, if we continue to allow the developers to do individual shuttles.
Town staff needs to reach out to these developments as this moves forward, and it's separate from that as part of the TMA process. So we get some understanding of what's going on, say, with Athena, and then move forward, and Athena is in agreement with and can be a part of that conversation through the TMA shuttle development process. But that conversation has to happen because, obviously they're running shuttles. And, the Marriott has a shuttle. Lynx isn't up and running, so that they don't really have a shuttle, but they're
Right.
advertising. They're trying to say they're connected.
Right. But as soon as they sign a lease,
Right.
and they've,
And
you know,
if it's-
they've
if it's
pretty
signed-
much said that to me, that they're willing to sign a lease with a tenant and provide shuttle service if that's what they need to do to attract the right tenant.
Allison, I think you said you've already put together the RFP, right?
I'm in the process.
For the
of that.
management, all
Hopefully
right,
I'll
you're
have it
close, you've
probably
got
next week.
2 contractors identified you want to look at, we drive you in transaction. You're asking these guys about management of the TMA, but do those both also run shuttle?
Correct.
They do shuttles, right?
That was the
Is
reason
that
I
part of-
identified them. And We Drive You does Athena's shuttle.
Are you asking them-
That's a strategic decision on my part and part of the TMA, is that this would be a lot easier transition for Athena
Yeah.
if We Drive You is who we choose to go with the management of the TMA and potentially could just roll their shuttles.
Well, I'm
into-
asking because
That would be a much smoother transition for them.
the assessment that you set up to make up for the shortfall, what it sounds like you're moving towards is doing up something like that when you get an idea of what the shuttle what X, Y, and Z types of shuttle services will cost, maybe you do a menu or whatever, and then you do that assessment, and then you lay it out to the developers, probably these ones first that you're talking about. While you're talking to these guys about about the management contract, isn't there any benefit to including some sort of quote or bid request on what an elementary shuttle service would cost also?
It's sort of in the back of my head, but I feel like they're two different things, because we don't want to guarantee whoever we choose for the management firm the contract with the shuttle, because what if we could get it less expensive? So in my mind, they're two separate things. I've chosen those two firms as who I want to reply to the RFP because they have the capability of then turning around and operating our shuttle service, but I wouldn't want to necessarily combine the two RFPs or contracts.
And they'll be on board by the middle of May, so after one of them is on board, according to the timeline, you can start into that conversation perhaps.
Yes, and ideally, like I said, they both do shuttle operations, so their expertise in the ability to do some of this planning work that needs to be done essentially, I think would be a great benefit to the TMA and likely not cost us anything if they have the idea that down the road they're going to get the dollars to operate it.
All right. Tony?
So just quickly, what was the other group that you
We Drive You and Transaction Associates are the two.
So, and back to the Transaction Associates.
I want to ask, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to ask some questions about the merger, or the potential merger. So if they came together to do this, then they might consider that their contribution to the shuttle.
Correct.
And so that if and when there's another shuttle, they wouldn't be contributing anymore. This would be their contribution.
If it was another shuttle that served their population, then I think they would contribute. So in other words, this route, these three are all operating a route right now from Arsenal to Harvard Square. So if that's the route we choose to have them consolidate, and that becomes the first TMA shuttle route is Arsenal to Harvard Square, that would fulfill their obligation for the shuttle. If the TMA decides, gee, we really need, because Athena's doing 6 different shuttles. They also do one, I think, to Back Bay at this point, right, to the south end. If we decide as the TMA that there are multiple players that want to get in on a south end route, then everybody who's interested in running a south end route would have to pay if they want us to stop and serve their population into that shuttle. But in terms of checking the box that they've fulfilled their permit obligation, I would say yes, that would fulfill their permit obligation. But I don't feel like we're going to be one and done on the shuttle stuff. If we're successful, I think there's probably going to be multiple routes.
There's always continued analysis, I think.
I'm sorry.
There's always a continued analysis and change in shuttle routes with what Athena's been doing. That, you know, they've been testing the waters with different routes and seeing how well they're used, and you know, they're getting to experiment a lot more with their part concentration the way it is right now too.
So the other question then was that if these 3 folks decided to coordinate and to do one shuttle that would be part of the TMA, you're potentially having a TMA shuttle coming right on the heels of establishing the TMA.
Potentially, yes.
And if
I mean,
so,
this would be the quickest, in my mind, this is the quickest, easiest way for us to make that happen, because they're already paying into individual services, right?
And then the role
And there's already riders, potentially.
So then the public's participation in this new configuration of 3 companies coming together, we could then start offering public participation in that shuttle?
Correct.
Riding, you mean?
Right, yeah. Riding.
That would be part of the TMA shuttle.
Right.
That would have to be
Right.
developed as part of
Great.
I want to,
And it would also open up the possibility of those other developers along the corridor to pay into an established shuttle as opposed to starting from scratch. So Gables, for example, we could come up with a proportional cost for them pretty easily to join onto that shuttle as well.
thanks. So this has been a conversation going on for a long time, and we've all heard a lot of it. We have some new people here who haven't been in the conversation before, and I know this has been, you maybe were catching up on a lot of your understanding, but I'm really happy to have you here. So I think, you know, the process gets better when we have members of the public here talking with us, and John is a member of the public. Charlie and John, everyone actually in this room lives in Watertown, so, except maybe you. But if you were thinking of something that you wanted to answer it all along but didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, like, I want you to fire it away, because I want you to come back and participate in this with us. So is it pretty clear what's been going on here?
Yeah, I think I've got a pretty good idea.
Oh, you're amazing then.
Is this going to be mostly during work hours, like the morning rush and the evening rush, or is it?
That would be I would say so, just because that is when the businesses are looking to get their people to and from.
I just want to throw it out there. I drive through Watertown Square every single morning, and it's awful. It takes me like 7 or 8 minutes just
To get through that
you know,
intersection.
It's taking 30 seconds in the evening to get through.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited about this idea of being able to use a shuttle to get through. And I work at Athena, so
Oh, great.
I don't think any of our shuttles go past Pleasant Street, so.
That was my next slide, was, because that's the other quarter we've looked at. So until 4:30 today, that first line said only one required development, but now we have a second required development along Pleasant Street. But this quarter is a little less robust in terms of the permitted folks. We only have 2 that are required along that stretch along. I personally think there's a bigger need because we don't have the MBTA service on that quarter, but this one is going to require a deeper dive, I think, to find an easy solution. I mean, I don't think there's where the other one, I feel like there's already shuttles out there and we can just consolidate them. This one feels like there needs to be a little bit more investigation into what the needs really are. We're doing some of the survey work. We've surveyed Watertown. Some of the other ones are still sort of in the process. This is another one where the Newton is very interested in potentially coordinating with us on a shuttle down this corridor to Watertown Square. So, but again, there's a lot of conversations that need to happen to kind of get this one. What I personally think would be a great thing is to sort of pilot some service along there to see what the ridership is for different scenarios. You know, do we connect to Community Rail? Do we connect to Watertown Square? Do we connect to Harvard Square? And again, if we choose a management firm that has vehicles at the ready, they're probably going to be much more easily, willing to pilot something for us.
So,
Are you on the Pleasant Street corridor?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that as the Pleasant Street corridor develops residential and we continue to have an employment node on the Arsenal Street corridor, I think the reason that we looked at those 2 corridors for both, where our development goes, where our economic development goes, but also where the shuttles go is because we know that we think that there's people that are living in Pleasant Street and are working along the Arsenal Street corridor, not just at Health. So there might be some synergy there as well. And we'll find that out through both the employment surveys and also the resident surveys along Pleasant Street.
the TMA will be, part of the TMA's work is actually these surveys of their
Yep.
membership, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, John?
Just a quick question on this, there's not been any conversations with Waltham about participating. You mentioned River Street earlier.
Waltham is a part of the 128 Business Council. So while there are no legal reasons why one TMA couldn't work in another community, it's typically sort of grandfathered by the TMA who puts the stake in the ground. And it's generally a conversation that needs to happen. As is Newton, by the way. Newton is part of 128 Business Council service area. But we have had the conversation with 128, and they were amenable to us dealing with the neighborhoods that border Watertown. So there's a possibility we could have that same conversation with the stuff that borders. I think the answer to anything that's along the 128 corridor would be a no. That they're already serving those folks through their TMA.
Someone mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
We've actually, before Allison was here, we actually reached out to EDC. That's my wife works at EDC, so I, connected Patrick with the head of. They would love to have a shuttle system. They use numbers, and it comes. They're a nonprofit. They're really large. They have like 800 employees there, but they need to know the numbers. So they were just basically on a holding pattern until we get to.
Right. But that was also when 128 was managing this TMA, so the conversation might be different now. They might not be, 128 might not be as willing to allow us to be in that corridor.
Their territory.
Correct.
By the way, I don't know if everybody knows, Representative Hecht is working on some legislation right now about TMAs. Is about potentially requiring membership in a TMA. Is TDM or TMA?
TMA.
TMAs.
But we hope to broaden it out.
Mm-hmm.
A little more, as we talked about last time, there's a relationship that we need to meet on.
Right.
Process. That's a much longer conversation. So both, as to the details of that and how the TMAs sort of fit into that, but also broader issues around transportation.
It would be a great source of funding for TMAs if it goes through.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me, there was this piece of money that was in the budget that went away for the Watertown TMA, Then I thought maybe you had said it to me, or I dreamed it, that it was going to come back?
Well, and earlier this week, I mean, there was $50,000 for startup costs. It was actually earmarked to the business. Because at that point, they were the ones who were going to be providing these planning services. It got 9C by the governor. We have been hopeful that at some point in this year, this budget year, we go back and look at those 9Cs and see if we can restore some of them, or some part of them. It is looking less and less likely. But it's something we don't talk about for the next budget cycle. After, maybe at some point in the next couple of weeks, we can sit down together and talk about whether there's a
Yeah, absolutely.
that makes sense to make part of the budget ask for.
And is that part of the congestion mitigation air quality
No.
funds? Okay, so it's separate from that. So the congestion mitigation air quality contracts for the TMAs that the state has are up. They have one more year, then we will renegotiate. And at that point, I would definitely put the Watertown TMA in the mix in terms of...
We had talked about that quite a bit, yeah. 128
Yeah.
Business Council was going to put a proposal.
Whether or not, I mean, we don't even know if they're going to fund the existing TMAs. It's always a question. But assuming that there is still going to be funding through congestion mitigation air quality, I would definitely lobby hard that Watertown TMA deserves.
That could be a game changer as far as
What is
affording the
name of
shuttle,
that
right?
money?
No, because I think that's the key money to not go to shuttle services.
What? All right.
Cannot go to shuttle services, right. It would be, the Alston Brighton TMA has it right now. So it's for forming TMAs, at least the last round of contracts. Forming TMAs got $50,000 for 3 years, so a total of $150,000. And it was for operating costs of the TMA. So basically helps pay for staff, programming, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'll make it work.
Yeah, we would figure it out.
So what is
Absolutely.
the name of the state agency or the state?
It's MassDOT, so the Mass Department of Transportation. Oh, the funds?
Yeah.
Congestion Mitigation Air Quality.
Thank you.
And it's federal highway. Yeah,
Mitigation air quality.
yeah. It's,
They work through MassDOT to
um,
provide that to the TMA.
no, they actually individually contract with each TMA now. So each TMA has its own.
So it's federal money.
Correct.
So if this TMA was set up as a separate legal entity,
We would sign a contract with MassDOT directly. Correct. Yes, help us.
put us in a good position to
Yes.
apply for that.
Particularly for the formation money. So they, last round of contracts, they separated out forming TMAs from existing TMAs. Existing TMAs can only use the money towards marketing. They can't use it for operation, whereas forming TMAs can use it for operational costs. Much harder to spend $50,000 on marketing, let me just tell you, as a nonprofit, especially because the state doesn't allow you to, pay for any kind of tchotchkes or anything like that. So it's a much stricter budget for the folks who have been around. And I would think they potentially, with 128 being the management partner, might have looked at them as an existing TMA, and then we would have been, so this, in terms of MassDOT money, if we're able to get it, kind of opens up some more possibilities. It's also a 1-year contract for existing TMAs versus a 3-year for forming TMAs.
So the bill that is being considered, is it still young? You're just still working on that, right?
And in fact, I heard recently that even among the TMAs, they want to have some further conversation as to whether we've got the bill right. So there's a lot of work to be done.
On another positive note, in terms of TMA recognition, I was able to, the state does ECO Awards, which are awards they give to developers and TMAs, Mass Rides partners and TMAs that recognize those folks who are doing good work around TDM. And even though we're not officially incorporated, I was asked that we be included in the ECO Awards this year. And Athena will be getting an ECO Award, VHB will be getting an ECO Award, and Tufts will be getting an ECO Award under the Watertown TMA name. So a little plus on our side and start to...
What does that turn into? Is that, what kind of money is that?
It's just recognition. It's
Oh,
just,
okay.
it starts to kind of raise
Oh,
the
I thought it
visibility
was some
amongst
money.
the players that the Watertown TMA is a
That's fine.
thing. It's happening. We're doing good
There's
work.
money.
Yeah, it encourages them to keep on
Right.
working at it,
Correct.
too.
Okay.
Yes. And Athena was actually even chosen as a spotlight winner, which is more than just an ECO Award. They're actually going to talk about their programs specifically at the awards, which I think I'll send you guys the date. I don't
Are you
have it off
gonna
the
go
top
to
of my
it?
head. Oh, yeah, and everybody can, I mean, you have to buy a
Good.
ticket. It's at Fenway Park. It's a breakfast.
Yeah, it'd be good for them to
but-
see you sitting in the front row saying,
Yes. That's what I thought. I thought we could use a positive in the press around the Watertown TMA, so I
thanks, Charlie.
threw our name out there.
All
Right? It's great.
Is there anything else from the audience? Anything else from the committee? Yes?
Not about the TMA, but I'm new to Watertown. Maybe here last spring, and I'm just curious what the process is for bringing up recommendations or concerns about different traffic.
Sure, well, this committee we're all 3 town councilors, so and all the councilors are assigned to committees. The committee can't really do anything on its own unless it's been referred a matter by a vote of the majority of the town councilors at a council meeting, so that's why we're doing this today. You can also contact Gideon, he's a town staff member who's here every day.
So during the day, you can call, we staff the head committee, and I'm a town planner, and then DPW plays another role, depending on what your questions or comments are.
Most of the time, they can settle it, but if it's a bigger policy thing, then, yeah. So, thank you, Allison, thanks, Gideon, and everybody.
You going to send us this, so?
Please do. Do we want to meet, when do you think we should meet again, guys?
We're meeting on the 29th, right?
We're meeting on the 29th for,
Isn't that when the other folks are coming?
oh, that's when the MBTA is coming, yeah. So, do you want to talk about another meeting with these guys? She said, look, based on her timeline.
She had given us, next time I'm going to ask her to give us this printout.
In advance.
Well, no, even at the meeting.
Yeah. So do you want to, what do you think, guys? Can you throw up your timetable slide again, just for us to talk for a second?
Whoops, sorry.
So it's,
What about May?
the contract with the management firm will be hopefully on 5/18.
If they choose a management firm, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have any recommendation on that. I think an individual might be better, give us more flexibility.
Yeah. TMA
But then
member,
that's up to the TMA.
review the RFPs. So would we want to meet them before they do that or after?
Well, do you think we have any influence in that? Because if we don't, then there's no reason to meet.
Vinny?
Vinny, when are you going to take a day off and go to bed?
Yeah, I think tomorrow night, yeah. Did we want to look at the bylaws? I mean, I don't know what was our...
Bylaws, when did you say those were going to be set?
My guess is that around the same time as the MOUs are done, so towards the end of May would be,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll know better once.
So why don't we have a meeting mid-May? If we have a meeting mid-May, what would we have a chance to look at? You'd have already made the TMA... Doesn't the TMA have to officially form and the MOUs have to be signed before the TMA can make a decision on whether to go with an individual or with a management team?
Not necessarily.
Officially, who would they be?
Oh, we have the advisory committee, which is essentially advising us on all of the bylaws, on the review process, so everybody who's involved with the advisory committee will be on the board of the TMA, so it's sort of a formality.
But legally, if I was to have a contract with you as a
Well,
manager...
Yes, so we're going to choose the firm and let the firm know, but we won't sign the contract with the firm until after we sign the
Okay.
MOUs, because we won't have money more than anything else. It's just, I didn't get a chance to clarify this, but just so you know, all the legal costs and everything is going to be reimbursed to the town based on, from the TMA's money. So the town isn't out that money, we're putting it in place that it'll be a reimbursable expense. We just don't have the funds and
Okay.
start selling.
So it sounds like on 6/1, the MOU will be finalized in the bylaws, in a perfect world, will be done. So why don't we meet near the end of May, so we can see a draft of that? You'll probably have a draft well before that of the bylaws. It'll already be discussed a couple of times with the members.
For some reason that changes once I talk to the lawyer next week, and shake hands.
So do you guys want to meet at the end of May?
Yeah.
On the 18th, they're planning their meeting in May, so
The only thing is, the council president is scheduling budget hearings. So if we pick a tentative date, you need to check with Mark to make sure that he hasn't penciled them in for budget hearings.
Where would we be able to say, I have an opinion on management team versus individual? I just send it to Gideon, or did I just send those comments to Steve, since he's our rep on the management? He's the rep on he's the town official on the TMA, right?
I think so, yeah. Or here, or at our next meeting, if it was sooner, or tonight.
I think it's much better to have someone who is independent than to have a management team, and let that person work their own magic. But it's my opinion.
You're like the idea of having an executive director?
Yes. If you have an advisory board, the advisory board can be the supervisory board, just like they do everything else, right? So they add one task to their list is that they supervise the ED. But the ED has the flexibility to do things.
But even if the ED is housed at the management company, it's still a position that's paid by the TMA. The board still governs that person and that person's contract.
It just opens up the possibility. It gives us more flexibility in terms of budgeting, and it also opens up, it's one-stop shopping in a lot of ways. So instead of the executive director coming on board in July and having to create all of the services we've talked about, a management firm is going to already have a right matching system in place. They already have a guaranteed right home in place.
Yeah, but we don't have much. I mean, you hire a management team with a contract, right? You say, this is what you're going to do, right? But who supervises that process?
Who supervises the person? So they would essentially assign a staff person.
And the staff person is a staff person for them, not for us. So it's pretty much like what we had talked about with the business council, right?
I think it is.
Except that we have our own board. So when we were talking about 128 Business Council as being the entity, we were essentially a subsidiary of
Right.
the 128 Business Council. So the 128 Business Council already has a board representing all the towns they represent. Watertown would have been one, spoke in that wheel. Now we're talking about, your board is all of the folks who are just in Watertown.
Yep.
So we are essentially having a firm.
Keep that conversation going.
It's just interesting how we've come around,
Yeah.
because we...
Well, I mean, yeah, it is. We've come full circle.
We went full circle, because I remember having this discussion about, let's have our own organization, our own, and...
But that was the recommendation, based on, Patrick and...
Now we have a new and improved consultancy, so.
I don't have any skin in the game long term.
No, it's all
So
right.
I'm telling you what I think.
Right.
So,
I'm
Meeting.
not gonna be the long term.
When should we meet?
Do you want to be the executive director then?
When should we meet?
Oh, well, shit. You would have some skin in the game.
You think May is going to be packed with budget meetings, hearings? Do we,
you want to try to schedule something the week of May 15th, May 24th?
do you have a calendar on
Doesn't it usually
right
start
now?
at the end of May?
How about,
Yeah, like usually
Brenda,
the last 2 weeks in May, first week in June.
how about May 18th, you have a meeting with your group already penciled in, so what if we did it on the 17th, the night before their meeting? Would that be,
Yeah, that's fine.
would that be, if anything really happened here?
I
would
won't
it
be able to make the 17th, unless it's earlier, like at 5, or at 5:30.
I can only do that on Thursdays and Fridays. What about the 16th?
What do we meet on the 2nd and the 4th, right?
Yeah,
That's fine.
there's no council meeting that night. May
It's fine.
16th?
May 16th, assuming there's not a budget here.
Okay. What time do you want to meet?
That's a kind of a prime night, isn't it, for budget hearings?
He won't start till the 23rd, I think.
You just said the last 2 weeks.
23rd.
You know, I don't, you have,
We want to do it the 15th to be safe?
15th, Monday. That'll probably be free.
That's not a regular occurring meeting for any other committee, is it? So let's do the 15th then, if that's okay with you two. And then Mark can squeeze something in later in the
Want
week.
to maybe, what time do you want to meet?
I like 6:30.
Let me just see, I got to get you into... Can we meet a little earlier on Monday?
I could try to get here at 6.
Can we try 6?
They're really trying hard,
Allison, is that okay with you?
cracking down on people, but,
So we can get a look at the draft MOU and the bylaws. Could you get it to us before the meeting, though, so we can
Yes.
look it over? All right.
And I'll, like I said, if for some reason in the next 2 weeks it looks like that's not doable, I'll let you know,
Okay.
in terms of having stuff to show you.
Thanks for your
Thank you.
presentation and all the hustle you've been doing. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, adjournment. We're adjourned officially.